Hello and welcome to the post-mortem for a recent outage that we had on the Chef supermarket website. This post-mortem happened yesterday, which if you're watching this not right now, yesterday might be a meaningless thing for you. So the incident happened on Thursday, August 13th, and it began at about 5:22 a.m. Universal Time. So my name is Nathan Harvey. I am going to be leading this postmortem, and if you're watching, welcome. If you're watching and would really like to participate in this postmortem, there are two things that you can do to be invited into the Google Hangout. First, you have to make sure that we haven't exceeded the maximum capacity, which is 10 people, and we haven't exceeded that yet. So if you would like to join, you may either jump into #chef on Freenode IRC and contact me, send me a direct message there on IRC, or you may tweet at me. I'm at Nathan Harvey, and it's NathenHarvey. If you do either of those things, also if you tweet me, please follow me so that I can direct message you on Twitter. I will send you the Hangout URL so that you can join this meeting live and participate in the discussion. Let me just share a postmortem document that we've already started to create here, so just give me a second while I switch to screen sharing. Okay, so you should now be able to see my screen. And I just want to remind everyone that this is a blameless postmortem. We will not focus on the past events as they pertain to could've or should've. And all follow-up action items will be assigned to a team or individual before the end of this meeting. If an item is not going to be a top priority leaving the meeting, we're not going to make it a follow-up item. We may yet capture it as a thing that we'd like to discuss in the future, or a change that we might, or recommendation, but if it's not an actual top priority item, it will not be a follow-up item, it won't be an action item coming out of this. So I'd like to first start by describing what happened and walking through the timeline. An important part of a postmortem is to make sure that you have an accurate and complete timeline so that you have a good understanding of everything that happened. So first I'll start with a description of the outage, or a description of the impact. During this outage, Berkshelf was unable to download cookbook dependencies. Customers of the supermarket were unable to log in. OpsWorks, which is Amazon's service for running Chef, was failing if the OpsWorks configuration included a Berkshelf run. And I'll say some more words about that later. I have some stuff that we can talk about there. And there were also some sporadic page rendering issues on the supermarket. The way that those manifested themselves were that you might go to a page and you would see the copy for the page, but it would not be styled properly, as if the CSS was completely missing. So before we move on to the timeline, I'd just like to pause for a minute and ask the people that are here if there were other impacts or other things that we should add to the description.
Looks good to me.
All right. Sounds like we've got that pretty well covered. So when it comes to the timeline, the two most important metrics for any postmortem are the time to detect the outage and the time to resolve that outage. So our time to detect this outage was 308 minutes. So we believe that the outage began at 5:22 a.m. UTC, and we actually detected it at 10:30 a.m. The time to resolve was 387 minutes, so again, it began at 5:22, and by 11:49 a.m. UTC, we had resolved the issue. As we come to action items, what we want to do is make sure that we're focusing the action items that we're going to capture out of this meeting. We want to focus those on things that will help us improve these two metrics, the time to detect and the time to resolve. So let me just walk through the timeline, and as I go through, if you have updates or other information that should be added, please jump right in and interrupt me. So at 5:14 a.m. And all times that we discuss here will be UTC unless otherwise noted. So at 5:14 a.m., there were some page rendering issues that were reported in an internal supermarket Slack channel. And again, as I mentioned, this looked like a page with no CSS, no style on it, although it had regular content from the supermarket. At 5:22, our Elastic Load Balancer was fully cut over to new instances, and this was when the incident began. So just a couple of words about that. First, I'll correct the spelling of the word new. It only has one E in it. But then second, what was happening at that time was we were actually deploying new infrastructure for the supermarket. So the old instances were still up and running. We cut over the Elastic Load Balancer to point at the new instances with newly deployed code. These were newly deployed incidents. Sorry, not incidents, instances. At 6:10, the supermarket errors or bookshelf errors were reported in IRC. At 7:18, a customer opened up a ticket. We won't, in this postmortem, go through the details of those tickets, but anytime you see Zendesk followed by a number, you can know that that was a customer that opened up a ticket with our support team. At 7:20, the incident was reported on an AWS or Amazon Web Services forum, and there I have a link off to that description or off to that message. And by the way, this postmortem, we will have a blog post about this so that you can view those things if you're not within the Chef organization. So in that thread, essentially, folks were saying that Berkshelf was failing when they were trying to deploy their systems. At 9 a.m., some representatives from Amazon sent an email to some Chef employees asking about the issue. We then had a number of Zendesk issues that were opened, or customer support tickets that were opened between 9:20 and 10:19, so for the next hour. And then at around 10:30, two Chef employees were reporting the issue in our internal supermarket channel, but they weren't sure how to escalate the problems. That was Tom and Eric.
Nathan, can I interject there as well?
Yeah, please.
Tom May and myself, Kimball Johnson, were talking about the incident approximately an hour before that, and again, unsure how to escalate.
Okay.
So that'd be about 9:30 UTC.
Great. Make sure that I got it captured as well. Thanks, Kimball. So at 10:30 UTC, Tom and Eric reported the issue in supermarket and said that they weren't sure how to escalate. By this time, I was awake and was sitting down at my computer, saw what was happening, and called this an incident. And so this is a process that we follow internally at Chef. When we do have outages, we identify an incident commander. The incident commander, following the normal process, is the first person on the scene to detect the issue. Now, in this case, there were people on the scene before me, but they had not received training in our incident management or incident command process, nor were they easily able to find documentation on what that was. So I came in, I had context, I called this an incident, I mentioned that in our customer support channel in Slack, and I took over as the incident commander. Right as I was doing that, Eric paged Paul Mooring, who's on our operations team. I then went over to another channel, our operations channel, and called it an incident and claimed to myself as the incident commander. Our process recommends that we call it an incident in both of these channels in Slack, and then we move our conversation to a specific incident command room or channel. So I went over to the incident channel, provided information about recent code deploy. We then, through ops code status and through our status.chef.io Tumblr account, put out an update to our customers and to the community, letting them know that there was an issue with the supermarket and that we were investigating. At the time, we knew it was an issue with the supermarket. I hadn't yet, and as we wrote that, we hadn't yet fully diagnosed, or it was not clear to me as I was writing that Burkshelf was the primary thing that was impacted. At 11:06, another customer ticket was opened. At 11:08, Paul Mooring had logged into our AWS console and was able to confirm that all of the supermarket servers behind the ELB were newly launched instances. At 11:23, we sent out another update to via the opscode status Twitter handle, and that status message basically said that we were continuing to work on the problem, and that we also knew that it was Burkshelf as well as Supermarket. By 11:27, Paul confirmed that the Supermarket servers were all running the new code base. So in addition to being new instances, there were potentially code changes. But by confirming that they were all running the same code base, we knew that that all of the servers behind the ELB should be behaving in a similar way. At 11:30 or 11:29, we launched a Zoom from our incident channel. This Zoom allowed us to do some synchronous screen sharing as well as troubleshooting. The recording is available internally at Chef. We will not be making that recording available to the general public because the primary reason is that we captured everything that we need to, I think, here in this document. By 11:45, the old supermarket instances were placed behind the new LB. So during our troubleshooting process, what we determined was that the previous instances that were running the supermarket were still up and in service, although not behind the load balancer. And so we took and moved those older instances, the ones that had been working the day before, we put those behind the load balancer, and then we took the new instances out of service. Now, the next thing that we had to do was we had to flush the /universe cache. So when you upload a cookbook, we have a process that runs asynchronously on the servers, on the supermarket servers, that will generate an output for the /universe endpoint of the supermarket's API. Now, Burkshelf uses this endpoint to do dependency resolution for all of the cookbooks that are available. We take that and we store it into our Redis cache within the supermarket infrastructure. The way to flush that cache is to upload a new cookbook. So Chris Weber did that at 11:46. At 11:49, Paul Mooring marked the incident as resolved in PagerDuty. At 11:49, also the incident itself was resolved, and we sent a status message out to Twitter, again via opscode status, that everything was resolved. At that point, we consider the incident closed. I did follow up with a couple of people on IRC to make sure that, in fact, they saw everything working again, as well as some folks on Twitter. Does anyone have anything they'd like to add to the timeline?
Not timeline, just a quick correction. The cache isn't actually generated asynchronously. It's generated the first time someone hits that URL. Okay. For those that have been around a while, you'll know that we had issues really early on in the supermarket days with URL caching being a little wonky. So yeah, that's actually created on first request when the cache is either stale or is non-existent.
So if a cookbook gets uploaded, that doesn't refresh the cache, but it marks it as stale, and then next request to /universe will generate the cache?
I forget if it flushes the cache or marks it as stale at that point, but okay. The cache is blown out at that point, and the next request is what generates what actually regenerates the cache. Okay, so
I guess to be a little bit more clear here, the way that the Redis cache was cleared was by uploading a new cookbook and requesting and doing a GET request on /universe.
Correct.
Okay, great.
Just for the sake of completeness as well, at about 11:30, we removed one of the new instances from the ELB and added one of the old ones back in and tested it, and noticed that the caching was preventing it from actually working as it should. And that's approximate. I could probably look up the exact time, but it was after we were on Zoom.
right? So the /universe, if you could, anyone that wants could pull up supermarket.com/universe, or sorry, supermarket.chef.io/universe right now. And what you would see is that there are location, I think they're called location keys. I have it here. Yeah, the location path and the download URL. So those at the time were pointing to the internal host name for a particular server that was one of the new instances. So it was an Amazon host name that was unreachable by anyone outside of that network, which was, in the end, was the real cause of the problem. So as Paul mentioned, we took that one out from behind the ELB and placed an old one into the ELB in an attempt to resolve that caching issue, or that the issue itself, but the cache properly prevented us from fixing it by following that process. Okay, anything else that we should note here in our timeline? All right, well then let's move on. Sorry, was that?
I was going to say, well, you could add that a supermarket engineer was brought in and confirmed the new code deployment, but it wasn't an actual action, so I think we're fine with that or without that.
Okay. Do you remember approximately what time? And by confirmed, the old you looked at the code base that was on the old instances.
Right, and gave context as to what was what had been going on that day before the incident.
Yeah, so that was prior to the Zoom, but I think it was actually after Paul, so it was probably right around here, at around, I don't know, we'll call it 11:28. Does that seem
works for me? Yep.
How appropriate?
Yeah, it was 11:23. I've got the log in front of me.
Excellent.
And also at 11:24, Nell confirmed that there was nothing showing up in monitoring, which is probably also relevant.
Thank you. Awesome. Anything else that should be added here? Either things that happened, things that we knew when we knew them, other contexts that we were able to gather throughout the process? All right, sounds like we're good. So let's move on to the contributing factors. Of course, if you think of something, just shout it out. So in this contributing factors, what I've done here is try to document a couple of things that happened, some of which I've already said, but I just want to read them for the sake of completeness here. So the supermarket was switched to using a new omnibus build for production. So not only was it new hardware or new instances that we were deploying, but we were deploying in a new way. The newly deployed servers were missing a variable for the host key in the supermarket.json file. And as a result, they were falling back to the host name of the server. And so because of that, the location path and download URLs that were given in the /universe response were using the real host name of the server. So it was called app-supermarket-prod-i, blah, 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 all that stuff that's listed there. And what it should have been returning was the supermarket host name, which is HTTPS, or at least supermarket.chef.io. The sporadic page rendering issues, which were one of the things that we noted at the top, were on the supermarket, can be attributed to a period in time when both the new and the old supermarket servers were behind the ELB. So as the transition was happening early on in the deployment process, two different versions or two different sets of infrastructure were running. And then finally, so I think I think essentially what I'm saying there is that while it did present itself as an issue, that issue was fully resolved by the time all of the new servers were behind the ELB and the old servers were gone. But that's also the time when /universe started to break. We reached back to the folks from AWS to ask about OpsWorks and how that was impacted with Burkshelf. And so part of the response that we got back from them is OpsWorks has an optional feature where customers can enable a Burkshelf run before OpsWorks executes the actual Chef run. If enabled, the Burkshelf run would be done before each Chef run. So, for example, setup or application deployment or any of the other stages that OpsWorks allows you to configure. Now, it's not really a good practice to enable that, but it is super easy to enable that. And one of the things that the folks from Amazon mentioned was that they're going to work on their documentation to remind people that it's really not a great idea to have a runtime dependency on the supermarket. What you should do instead is try to vendor your cookbooks much like anyone else hopefully would do. Any other contributing factors or things that we should capture here?
Yeah, Nathan, I've got a couple of thoughts on the monitoring situation as far as like contributing to how long it took to resolve.
Yeah. Right.
One is we validate whether we get a response, like a 200 response from the universe endpoint. Excuse me, but we don't validate the content of that response currently, or at least not to a complete enough degree that it caught this. And second is our monitoring system is inside AWS behind the firewall where the FQDNs actually work, but that's not true for users of the service, meaning we can get in a state where a check says, can I download a thing? And it can because the FQDN is valid, but that's not actually true except for in the place where the monitoring checks run.
Right. Thank you.
And this is probably a little tangential, but there's the side of me that, because I spend way too much time in delivery land, where there should be a functional test as part of the deployment that lets us know that this sort of thing happened. Like check to make sure that we can actually do a Burkshelf run from the new universe endpoint that just got stood up.
Mm-hmm. So
I guess the
I was just going to confirm with the supermarket engineers that there is no such functional test in place today. So that would be...
There is not, no. That would be a great thing to add.
No, we were just talking about that this morning, actually. We need that.
Great. Really good information. Anything else we should add here?
Well, on the process side of things, obviously it would be we would have resolved the issues quicker if Tom and I had known the escalation procedures. So communicating internally the escalation procedures again would be a good idea as an action.
Obviously, that's a big thing. That had a dramatic impact on our time to resolve. Okay, great. Let's run through the stabilization steps next that we took. And again, if you have other contributing factors or anything else, just interrupt me. But the stabilization steps that we took was that the old supermarket instances were put in service behind the ELB, and the new supermarket instances were marked out of service. And then a new cookbook was uploaded to the supermarket, and we made a request against the /universe endpoint, and that cleared the Redis cache and resolved the issue for us. Great. I think that fully captures the stabilization steps that we took. Does anyone have anything else that should be added here? Okay, so then just reviewing our the impact of this issue. So again, Burkshelf was unable to download cookbook dependencies. Users were unable to log into the supermarket. OpsWorks was failing during provisioning runs and any other stage that utilizes Burkshelf. And as I've learned and confirmed with the Amazon folks, just about any stage of the life cycle that you're managing with OpsWorks can optionally include a Burkshelf run. There were sporadic page rendering issues on the supermarket, but again, I think that those were unrelated to this particular outage. The time to resolve the outage was 387 minutes. It's painful to say, but it's also the truth, and that's what we report. That's part of what we do here. So you should not feel any guilt. I feel guilt, so I feel compelled to tell you, you should not feel guilt about that. Like, it is what it is. Okay. I think that covers the impact. But I'd love to know if you have anything else. Again, I'll just pause for a second. Great. So the other thing that or really the big part of this process here, is to come up with some corrective actions. Now, as part of the process of writing out this documentation, I took a stab at some corrective actions. These were just ideas that popped into my head that I wrote down, and so they're totally open for discussion. These are not things that are written in stone, but I'd like to review each one of these and then also either look at clarifying these or adding additional corrective actions that we can take to prevent a similar issue in the future. So the first corrective action that I listed there was that we should add a monitor to AWS that will check the content returned by supermarket.chef.io/universe, searching for the specific string that we're looking for. A 200 response clearly is not enough. Or optionally, we should create one that actually runs the Burks install command, so a full integration test that can run Burks install. I'd just love to stop talking for a minute and hear thoughts on that as a corrective action, or as a potential corrective action, and as well as maybe some clarification of which of the two we should do, or maybe how that might be implemented.
From my perspective, we should do both. Monitoring, integration testing are two separate concerns, and monitoring checks for things that might go wrong during the, I guess, running of the service, and then integration should happen as part of the deployment process.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm not sure how exactly we would implement it, where it would run, but if we ever were to implement the feature to a private supermarket be able to stay in sync with public supermarket, we could set up our staging environment to stay in sync with production, and then before we push code to prod, we could verify that a Burks update works from staging. And that would be like our test before we push things into prod. I'm not sure where we would set up monitoring, but I think a Burks update or a Burks install is something that we should be monitoring.
We already have internal that we use for other services, an external monitoring instance that we could just add a check that literally just runs like a Burks update.
Oh, great. Do that.
Well,
I mean, so the specific case, the looking at the output of the universe would be, you could parse that and review it. But my concern about that is that it would be a monitor that would be a bit too closely tied to the precise system that is now, rather than something that is actually the correct check.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with Kimball. So what you're saying basically is that writing a monitor that looks at the copy that's returned from an HTTP GET is a pretty brittle monitor if things were to change over time, and it's certainly not a monitor that we could use in other deployment scenarios. But at the same time, if we had a monitor that was validating Burke's install or Burke's update from an environment or from a network that was not the same network as the supermarket, that would be a much better check.
I think it may not be ideal, but it would be a good solution for the time being, since supermarket is so critical to Burke's, and Burke's is so critical to so many of our chef users. I think in this case it would be okay to have a pretty specific test for that specific use of supermarket.
The cost of tests is pretty low. Like I say, write specific regression tests. Be as specific as we want.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so maybe the question that I'd like to get maybe some consensus on is this first bullet as written is to add a monitor that is external to that network, that calls /universe and checks for a specific string. So what do you think? Do we think that this is a monitor that we should include? And then if so, who should we put on the hook to have that monitor implemented?
So I would say that, like, the consensus I heard was, let's not even bother with that, and let's just do a Burke's install where where the check actually, because like in concept, what the check should do is ensure that there's a Burke's file, a valid Burke's file, like so it writes a Burke's file out to disk, and then runs Burke's install or Burke's update, either one, which should give us everything that the first one does, because because what you actually want to do is you want to validate the JSON. You want to make sure that you really just are trying to make sure Burke's doesn't blow up, and that's going to be the best way. I would say just remove that first bullet and just focus on the second one, and as part of that, make that external.
I disagree. I don't think that would actually necessarily work if. I'm understanding, but is there not a whole list of endpoints that Burke's could have been downloading from, and only one of them was incorrect?
Right, but we would write out our own Burke's file. So if you write out a Burke's file that says use the supermarket endpoint and go pull this known good cookbook. In fact, you could actually go so far as, if you wanted to do a full integration test before launching an application, upload the application, or upload and then download it. But I would, for this external check, I would just make sure, write out a Burke's file and run Burke's install,
Guys,
and that returns 0.
Can I suggest that we're rat-holing a little too much on implementation? Let's make a follow-up item for somebody to monitor that Burke Shelf does it, and we could discuss details outside the post-mortem. But it sounds like we're all in agreement we need external monitoring, and somebody should own that, and that person can kind of discuss the decisions around how to approach it.
Great.
+1.
All right, as supermarket engineer, I'd be happy to be responsible for that. I will be reaching out to the operations team and such for advice on that.
That sounds great.
Okay. Did I capture that well? Add an external monitor that validates Burke Shelf functions properly, and that will be assigned to Nell.
Yep.
Sounds good to me.
Excellent.
Just to add on to the pile, I think that grabbing that universe file is good. I would make sure that it's valid JSON, since it is a JSON return, and that it has a large number of rows. I wouldn't look for a specific string, but I still think that that's a good idea, and I don't want it dismissed.
Sure.
But I will leave it to Nell for how she wants to do it.
Yeah, implementation details to follow.
Cool.
Awesome. The next thing that I suggested was that we add an integration test. So this is not a monitor, but an integration test to the supermarket that validates the location path and download URL. I would recommend, unless I hear otherwise, that we should probably add an integration test that validates that that Burke shell functions properly, and leave it at that as well.
I'm probably mincing words, but I'm thinking this is a functional test, but that's probably because I spend too much time thinking in terms of delivery. But yeah, I would agree that we need to verify that Burke's works.
The thing I love doing most is fighting about whether something is an integration test or a functional test or a unit test or a smoke test. Maybe this is a smoke test, dude. I don't know.
No. It's not not fast enough feedback. But we'll argue that later over beers.
Awesome. Elle, would you sign up for this one as well?
Yeah, I was about to say, I think those first three are all going to be me, and that's absolutely fine.
Great. Yeah, so it sounds like we're all in agreement on at least the first two. Let me talk through the third one. We should refactor the supermarket code base so that only the FQDN or the host needs to be set within the supermarket.json. On further inspection of the code base, we set both of these values. I for one, and talking with Kurt yesterday, could not think of a scenario in which you would not want those both to be the same, and so refactoring just seems to make sense. Now, would you agree with that as a good?
Absolutely.
Great. Sweet. And you just volunteered to take it also, so I'm going to assign it to you.
Volunteered, voluntold, it's the same thing.
I'm pretty sure you said the words before.
I did. Yeah.
But, it's kind of implied. And then last, the next corrective action that I have suggested is that we make it easier to find the incident response process documentation.
I would totally agree.
I agree with the sentiments, but what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, I'm not sure. So I guess the thing that I would ask, since we have Kimball here, is you noticed that there was a thing. You didn't know what to do. You didn't know how to report it or how to escalate it. Where did you look to try to find out? And I'm sorry, because as I listened to the words when they came out of my mouth, it sounded kind of accusatory, and it was definitely not that.
That's absolutely fine. So there was a couple of things. Firstly, we'd seen it on IRC, and I opened up Zendesk to see if there were already tickets had been raised, which there had been, and I could see that they were being looked at by our support in the UK, but the responses they were giving were more finding out more information about the issue rather than escalation, and there was no correlation between the tickets. There hadn't been initially, at the point I was looking, noticing that the tickets were correlated, which from the individual tickets is understandable. They were all very differently worded. So we looked at that. We looked in. We tried to figure out if there was anything obvious within Slack of how to escalate, but in general we didn't really know where to look. There's no clear place to look for it within sort of, we don't have the documentation or anything shared. Certainly from the point of view of the CSEs and TAMs, we have a document that's onboarding that everybody's given to when they join, which could have that information in, and I'm pretty sure it doesn't because I was one of the people that wrote it.
So I guess there's a couple of things that are standing out to me. One of them is the operations room should probably have a link to our incident response process. The TAM, we should probably also update any onboarding documentation, specifically the TAM and our support engineering documentation, to ensure that they know how to start an incident. The other thing that it occurs to me, and this is going to sound silly, but where I think we're almost jumping the gun. How do you even know that it's an incident, right? Like it's you need to go wake up engineers, and I don't know that at any point. Like at what point, Kimball, did you think to yourself, or was it clear that it was an incident?
The number of people on IRC that were complaining about how Chef didn't care about the problem was about the point where we realised it was most definitely an incident.
Okay.
But yes, understandable, and that was in fact a question that was raised: is supermarket something that is supported, and whether it was a wake people up or not issue, which wasn't clear.
The procedure is now in the title of the incident room in Slack. Is that sufficient?
I didn't know about the incident room in Slack. We have 350 rooms in Slack.
That's my concern, is that as soon as we move it to the incident room, everyone involved in that incident knows about that room from that point forward.
What rooms in Slack did you look in?
Customer engineering, customer support came later. I got invited into the room. Probably not enough.
Okay. In other words, this is a broad educational issue. This isn't just like, we need to put more information in one place. We need to broadly communicate. Where do you even look?
Yeah.
Cool.
I would agree with that. And I've been around for a long time, and I have moments where, well, is this an incident? Is it not an incident? I mean, one of the things I learned early on was, well, if you're questioning if it's an incident, it probably is. But until you've had someone tell you, if you're questioning if it's an incident, and it probably is an incident, you don't actually know that necessarily.
Yeah, just for the record, it should probably be trained and communicated, but if you think it might be an incident, it's an incident, and that's like our formal policy.
Yeah. Pretty
That's
sure.
good for me. I'd much rather be woken up with a false alarm than not woken up when something severe is happening.
Well, and the first thing that should be within the escalation document is what is an incident, right? Clearly, if you're reading the document, you think it's an incident, then the document should be clear about what does or does not officially constitute an incident. Chain.
That makes sense.
So I'll take this on as an action if I need to, but someone should probably coordinate. Even I would go so far as to employee onboarding. So much of our company is technical and deals with this stuff on a day-to-day basis. It would be good to, as part of our new hire orientation, to add this to the, hey, if you become aware of something that we run online, and that include, so as we're giving a tour of the things that we provide to the public and to our customers, we should also mention, if you see something go wrong with that, this is how you escalate that to an engineer.
The only thing I will take exception to from what you said was the words, so much of our company is technical. I think it's important that we remind everyone that you needn't be technical to become an incident commander. And when you are the first on the scene, you are therefore the incident commander. You may hand off command, but the person that identifies the issue is, by default, the incident commander for that issue. And you should feel both empowered to take command, and you should feel responsibility to take command.
For sure. I think I was more implying that that it's likely we will run across these things through the normal course of what we do versus whether or not someone's capable or not of being an incident commander.
So, and I think the high-level point that you were going at, Chris, is right. Nathan, everything you said is right. And I think where the two meet is just that this needs to be part of ongoing annual training across chefs, and not just new hires. But every year there should be a company-wide training that includes this kind of information. And obviously in a training like that, you're not going to know everything, but you're not going to be able to convey everything. But you should at least be able to convey to people that these things exist and where you can find them and educate yourself so that when the moment does arise, people know where to look. And so this is a company-wide IT failing.
So, Ben, can I assign this one to you then, that we work with the employee experience team to get incident response as part of our onboarding and ongoing education?
Yes.
And are you comfortable with that wording?
I would possibly take exception with employee experience team because I don't believe this is an HR issue, but I see where you're going with it. So.
Yeah, my thought there is that they kind of own the onboarding experience and touch everyone new that joins the company. So, but what I will, how about?
That's fine.
Okay.
I know what you mean.
All right. Great. Should we have incident drills? Game day?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
War games.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think that's a really good idea.
If anyone wants to hold the pager for ops for a week to get used to it, that's okay with me.
Awesome.
And you can assign that to me too if you want to put on there.
That plan and coordinate incident response drills. Okay, so I'm going to leave these couple of notes here that I took, but let's review the corrective actions that we have now. So adding external monitors would help us with the time to detect. We would have caught this much, much sooner. Adding functional tests to the supermarket deployment process may have, probably would have, I'm not sure the exact language there, but would have prevented this from happening. Refactoring likely would have prevented this from happening. Making sure that everyone on the team knows where to get to the incident or how incident response works and how to get to that documentation, how to escalate, would have, I think, improved our time to resolve, as well as planning and coordinating incident response drills would have helped our time to resolve as well. Are there other actions that we could have taken? We have about 10 minutes left here. Are there other actions that we could have taken that would have helped decrease our time to detect or our time to resolve this issue?
It's totally not an action item in this sense, but there's a side of me that's sitting here thinking, if this was used the delivery process, we would have caught it in acceptance because we would have had a functional test that checked to make sure Burks worked in functional. So there's a side of me that just wants to rub delivery all over this, but that's totally not an action item from this particular postmortem.
Yeah, I'd also probably take exception to that since we don't have a functional test there. We could totally run this in delivery and still have had this issue.
So
I would agree.
I think the broader thing kind of that Chris was hinting at here is we didn't touch on sort of like change management or deploy process in terms of actions, and I don't know how actionable it is, but it would have been nice if we had some more eyes on the initial rollout and we had I hate to use the phrase rollback, but that's really what it is, like a plan to get back to the old state if something went wrong. Because it felt like there was a bit of scrambling, saying how do we get back to the state we were in before the deploy.
Well, even was there a deploy plan in place as per kind of, and once again, I think this is a larger communication problem, right? Did we create a deploy plan for this change?
Yeah, I don't think we did. We have a separate set of sort of discussions and restrictions for things relating to hosted chef that I don't know that we do in supermarket currently.
That makes sense.
No, our current process only gets announced, I believe, through our Slack channel and asking Julia to promote. That's the only thing that happens that alerts the company that a deploy just happened right now. But nothing like that happened with this since it was it was actually switching the deployment process.
Well, and even promoting the artifact, would that have actually caused the deploy?
What caused the deploy with this was swapping in the new servers, and the rollback plan was to swap out the new servers and swap back in the old servers, which is exactly what happened. The problem is our verification process the verification process I used didn't test any of the, it didn't test perks.
Okay.
Problem.
I guess what I'm more actually asking about is not so much the process of the change, but like the announcement of the change. Like when we got on in the morning, was it clear to anyone that?
How do we currently announce?
Say that one more time.
How do we announce new versions of Chef?
So any hosted deploy things happen, like it's announced in pound operations. But there's like the actual release of software is separated from the release, the actual updating of hosted. They're two separate processes.
Okay.
Yeah, part of this discussion we might want to have outside the postmortem here, but I think what Chris is getting at is we kind of have a set of like policies that we follow to do deploys in hosted Chef because we're used to working with multiple teams. And it's not a thing that we've communicated or asked like Supermarket or some of the teams not working on our hosted product to do. But there's probably there's big gains in terms of safety of deployment if we try to sort of like broaden that process to fit Supermarket as well as hosted.
Yeah. So the thing that just changed, I found it interesting what you just said, that there's a different process. The two things aren't in sync. Releasing Chef versus deploying new versions to hosted. The change we just made to Supermarket now brings those two things in sync. So now when we release a new version of Supermarket, at that same instant, public gets updated too.
So I think maybe if we're trying to boil this down to an action, the action we want to have is a follow-up discussion on sort of releases and change management for Supermarket, and we don't need to solve what that's going to look like right now. We just need to schedule a time to discuss it.
Yeah.
The whole world is watching me. I can type really well, as you can tell. I'll take that one on. I feel like I'm a good person to help coordinate that meeting. Or at least drop it on a calendar somewhere. All right, well, that brings us about to the end of our time. We have, maybe 2 or 3 more minutes left before we wrap up. Are there any other corrective actions or items or anything else that anyone on this call would like to share before we do wrap up?
I'd like to say thanks to everybody involved getting this running again, and especially thanks to Kurt for getting that initial deploy done. I know it's stressful when things go wrong, but still a lot of good work in there with one little hang-up.
Yeah, this was
for a couple hours, no big deal.
This was clearly a nice team effort that spanned not only different teams within Chef, but also different continents, which was great. It's good to see everyone working together and working together remotely well. And working remotely together well, maybe would be a better way to say that. All right. Well, if you've tuned in, thanks. We're going to wrap it up here. If you're watching the video, thanks so much. There will be a blog post on this. If it doesn't go out today, it will go out on Monday, so you can check blog.chef.io. The opscode status, that's opscode_status on Twitter. We'll also tweet a link to the blog post. Thanks very much for joining our postmortem.